I recorded this episode last week and the audio didn't save. That's never happened before. Also, my daughter was hospitalized twice in the last week. So it has been a week. I'm re recording this. I am praying to the podcast gods that this is uploaded properly because I don't have time to re record it. And I am really excited for what we have coming up this quarter for you. And if you are wondering, so my daughter is fine. She is healthy. We've got some follow up to do to figure out what happened. So thank you for those of you that saw my story on Instagram, for those of you that have reached out. I appreciate all the well wishes. My daughter is home. She is feeling so much better. I have some investigative follow up, as any good naturopathic doctor would do, but happy she is on the mend, and thank you all for reaching out. Today, we're going to talk about something that I wish I had known 12 years ago when I started this journey. 12 years plus 8, if you count my 2 degrees, like what the time I was in school to be able to do what I do. And because I've been doing this for basically 2 decades, I've worked with women at so many varying stages of their journey. The rebuilding phase from infidelity, the rebuilding phase when they find out about their husband's alcoholism or drug use, being there for them through a cancer diagnosis, autoimmune disease recovery, a husband leaving, getting to work with a lot of women now that are single and dating again. But it's all these different phases of rebuilding. Other examples are cheering them on from selling their businesses, closing businesses, navigating early retirement. The playbook isn't written for women like us. The high achieving women I work with have one thing in common, and that is that they all want the same thing: fulfillment, to be cherished, to be pursued, to be desired, to let things go and be cared for, to have somebody else take the wheel. They want to be that carefree version of themselves again, catch themselves singing in the shower, laughing, playing. What they don't want is to carry it all anymore. They don't want to have to think 20 steps ahead for everyone. They don't want to do the emotional management. They are exhausted. They are done. And they know that there is another way. They just don't know what that way is. So in the early days of my career, my focus was on women's health. And when I started helping women, I thought the problem was inadequate healthcare for women, which is very true. I thought the problem was about not proper testing. We know that a percentage of research trials was done on men, even for medication prescribed for women. So we've had inadequate hormone replacement therapy for women. We are at higher rates of depression, stress, burnout than men, mainly because we carry the majority of the invisible workload. The more women that I worked with, the more that I healed myself. And this is why I opened a women's health clinic, was to help with these issues, to provide adequate care for women so they didn't feel crazy. They didn't go to their doctors and say, something's wrong with me. And they're told they're stressed. They're told to have a glass of wine. They're told they're carrying too much. But we weren't offering them any solutions. And a lot of times women's health conditions like PCOS, endometriosis, autoimmune disease, which again, women are way more likely to have than men, these things are underdiagnosed. And my patients were just pushing through. They were pushing through feeling terrible. the first number of my years of my career was spent dedicated to that. But it became clear that the issue was something deeper. And 10 years ago, things were a lot different. The world was a lot different. I thought women's lack of pleasure was the answer. I thought that helping women rewire their brains to be able to receive would change the whole game. So I spent the last 7 or 8 years teaching that in conjunction with women's health. And I thought, okay, now, because two things are true at once. So I thought, now I've got it. If we can work on pleasure mindset and adequate healthcare for women where their cellular health, their mental health, physical, spiritual, everything was being worked on, that was the recipe. And then something unexpected started to happen. Pleasure was the solution. It's how we heal, but it was not the depth of the actual problem. So this was something, and I'm kind of ashamed to admit it now, and I can't believe that I can see it so clearly from my vantage point. And my clients that I'm giving this information, these tools to, they can't, they're mind blown also that we never saw this before. We were missing it. Like when you take your sunglasses off after a day at the beach and you don't realize how dirty they actually were. And I love that feeling, that at the end of a beach day, feeling the sun-kissed skin, you're relaxed, tired, listen to the waves all day. But yeah, you take your sunglasses off and you're like, holy shit, I can see clearly now. That is exactly the clarity that I am giving my clients with these issues that they have had for years. So with anhedonia, with pleasure mindset, by putting the onus on women to have more pleasure, and that's how it was received, especially by my clients who are high achieving, by women with super traits. It was kind of like blaming them for a problem they never created. Right. And so do our doctors. I've talked about medical gaslighting for years and years. Your blood work looks fine. Why don't you rest? Why don't you take a vacation? And therapists, they call us codependent, people pleasers. We're told to communicate better, but it's putting the onus on us for a problem that we never created. And that's the majority of self help. Something that all of the women that I work with have in common is their super traits. The very qualities that made them successful in work, in their career, in life, leave them exhausted in sexless relationships. And we're not seeing it because the skills that work in career, the skills that work in the boardroom, in the operating room, are not the skills that work to get us to have the connection and support that we want in our relationships. And this can be relationships, it's romantic relationships for sure, but also friendships, also relationships with our children, also relationships with our employees. We, as women with super traits, high achieving women with super traits, we give more than we get. And we think we're helping, we think we're doing the right thing, but actually we're creating more disconnection. If you do not know if you have super traits or not, I want you to head to the show notes and take my super trait quiz for free. The super trait quiz is going to reveal the number one high achieving quality that helped you succeed, but now blocks your ability to receive rest and feel truly met in your relationships. The traits that you've been praised for, the hard work, the loyalty, the empathy, are the same traits that keep you giving more than you get in relationships. And statistically speaking, this is what one of my teachers has referred to as death in slow motion for women like us. It leads to resentment, exhaustion, health issues. And we know that feeling lonely, feeling unfulfilled in relationships is the equivalent to smoking 15 cigarettes per day. And I have yet to meet a woman with super traits that is not lonely in her like definitely her partnership, but usually in more relationships than that. With all the years of experience and the thousands of women that I have worked with, I can say this with certainty. Until women understand their super traits and how our super traits show up in intimate partnership, we will keep running ourselves into the ground and repeating the same toxic patterns in our health, in therapy, in our relationships. And it's going to keep us accepting crumbs and pretending that we are full. So, what is a super trait? Super traits are normal personality traits, but they are taken to the extreme. These are not flaws or disorders, they are amplified strengths. The most common super trait identifiers are high empathy, high loyalty, high tolerance, high responsibility, perseverance, hard work, forgiveness. And this is Sandra Brown's work. And she said, because these traits are so strong, they become over functioning survival strategies. And we get rewarded for them in so many areas, but they leave us feeling alone, exhausted, not seen. So, women with super traits often excuse harmful behavior. He's just stressed, he's busy with work, he'll change. It causes us to overlook red flags because we are so forgiving and so tolerant. And I'll watch women do this with me in real time where their partner will do something to hurt them, betray them, and she will excuse it and make it about his trauma and how he's feeling and that she understands why he did that. But she disappears. They take too much responsibility for the entire relationship. And this is that death in slow motion. It's if we are always giving more than we get, our tanks are empty while we're constantly filling our partners up. This is why married men's life expectancy is longer than single men, but it is the reverse for women because we are literally giving to build and support another person and not receiving the same amount in return, especially when you have super traits. And we stay for longer than most people would in harmful dynamics. Now, you do not need to leave your relationship, but you do need to understand your super traits to start healing. Your super traits are the qualities that got you praised your whole life, that made you successful at work, the glue in your family, the one that everyone could count on. But the truth is, these exact same traits leave you overextended. They're the reason you feel unseen, you're exhausted, and you feel starved in love. You're not met the way that you desire to be. They're survival strategies, brilliant ones, but they are not a recipe for intimacy. And this is why I created the quiz. It's 14 questions. It's going to take you 3 minutes. I want you to head to the show notes and do it now. You will get an email sequence that is going to be worth more than the last year of therapy or self-help. The link is in the show notes. And you're going to get an email from me every day for the next 10 days. It's going to give you so much clarity and insight as to why you are the way you are and how it shows up in relationship, and is going to connect dots that you have been looking to connect for years. I'm going to give you an example of a client, and this is indicative of many of my clients. So I had a client come to me thinking she had low libido. She tried hormones, sex therapy, supplements, nothing worked. She'd done the online programs, the whole podcast thing. And when we unpacked it, the real issue wasn't her desire. It was that she had spent years being loyal, forgiving, and patient in a relationship where she carried all of the emotional labor and overfunctioned for her partner's drinking, who he was a functional alcoholic. And it was one of those things that she didn't even realize how significant it was and how much extra effort that she had to put into their relationship. Her thought was, I'm the problem. My lack of desire is the problem. What do I need to do? Test my hormones because she was perimenopausal. What do I need to be eating? What do I need to be taking? What's my exercise routine? What's my macros? The libido wasn't the problem. The problem was twofold. The problem was her husband's drinking and under functioning and her super traits that kept having her do more to try and fix. And as any good superwoman would do, she was thinking 10 steps ahead. If they were out with friends and he was sleeping off a hangover, she was picking up the slack with the kids. So on the surface, she thought she was the problem because if he wanted to be intimate, she had no desire to be. But the thing is our bodies know, our nervous systems know, our pussies know. They know well before we know. Okay, I want to give you another example. So that was a relationship example, but I'm going to show you this shows up in every facet of how we approach life, and then we wonder what is going on. And also, super traits are not our fault. They are our survival strategy for how we exist in a world, in a patriarchal society that is meant to extract from us. But if we don't see that and we don't know what our super traits are, we don't know how to do any differently. So my client that was over functioning for her husband's drinking, she didn't even see it was a problem as her super traits. Like she forgave, she was tolerant, she was loyal, she gave and gave and gave and tried to fix and worked harder on herself for a problem that was never hers. But when she learned what her super traits were, when she learned how they showed up in relationship, gave her the tools to be able to tolerate his discomfort, to set some boundaries, right? Because when we ask a superwoman to do less or not overfunction, she doesn't know what to do. She short circuits. So gave her the tools to be able to handle the turbulence for a little bit. And he got help and he's sober now. And they're happier than ever having great sex because, oh my goodness, when he wasn't stinky and drunk, and that's actually something that all of my clients say, that when their husbands are drink too much, they say that like they smell and they don't want to have sex with them, obviously. But it took her understanding her super traits, taking ownership of what was hers and leaving him to deal with what was his, that he actually stepped up, and it gave the space for that relationship to heal on many levels. And even his relationship with their kids. Okay, I'm going to give you an example of shoes. My client, well, two examples of shoes. I've used the one before where my client was tying her 12-year-old son's shoes. Now we know this is overfunctioning because we're doing something that he could do for himself. And he didn't like doing it, so she would do it for him. She would buy shoes that were easy to put on until then, right? He gets to an age where it's not fashionable for him to keep doing that. So she would tie his shoes every day. But she was exhausted. And you can imagine if she's over functioning in this area, she's over functioning in many. And, she was trying to protect him from his feelings of inadequacy and not being able to tie his own shoes, even though he was 12. So we just fix. We do the research on other shoes. We're over functioning, but it creates disconnection. It creates something where, she'd snap at him later about something else or be exhausted because she's giving too much. But she didn't have the tools. She didn't have the ability to stop over giving until she understood her super traits. I'm going to give another example about shoes and dress code. I have a client whose investment firm is growing. They're hiring lots of employees, and they had a virtual employee that they're moving into the office and he had a suit on with tennis shoes, and she was enraged about his choice of clothing. And I asked her if they have a formal dress code policy. And to her, and her company's growing rapidly, okay, but they don't. And to her, she's like, no, we don't. But we're like, this is a business office. It's business attire. Look around at everyone else. And I said, well, that's what a superwoman would do, right? A superwoman would expect they would ask what to wear. They would look around at their interview and see what to wear, or they'd start overdressing and kind of gauge it. But we would overfunction. But we can't expect those around us to do it, especially if some of our traits are, pathologic. They're from trauma. So by being this way, by not knowing about our super traits, we can create disconnection through many facets of our relationships. And I do not want you to blame yourself because this is not the point. But understanding your super traits is essential to have pleasure, to have amazing sex, to have connected relationships. And this is friendships. This is with coworkers or employees, with our kids. Because without looking at things through the super trait lens, women waste years blaming their hormones, their childhood, their attachment style, their communication skills. Therapists miss it, doctors miss it, the smartest women miss it. I miss it for years because all of these systems, healthcare, therapy, relationships, they assume equal responsibility. But super women are already doing too much. Women with super traits are doing too much. So when you go to therapy and you're assuming equal tolerance, equal forgiveness, equal loyalty, equal all these things, no, that's not how it works. It's we are doing too much and we are not receiving enough. So we have to fix that balance. When you don't see your super traits, you get stuck in extractive relationships where you give more than you get, even with a well-intentioned partner. Because sometimes I talk to the partners of my clients and they're like, it's just not worth it for me to try. I just let her spin out and I try and, catch her if she falls kind of thing. We call survival love. We tolerate dynamics that drain us and we think it's normal because we have super traits. It's been like that for decades. And you lose access to your pleasure. You lose access to your desires, who you are as a fundamental, beautiful being. We lose access to our health and our power. And I've talked about this a lot, where our frontal lobe turns off, the pleasure centers in our brain turn off. We lose touch with our desires and our sense of self because we're so busy superwomaning it. If this is you, if my work speaks to you, what are you doing on October 2nd at 1 p.m. Eastern, 10 p.m. Pacific? I am hosting a masterclass on super traits. It is free. Head to the show notes, reserve your spot. I promise this will be worth your time to attend live. There will be a replay, but you're going to get way more handouts and bonuses if you attend this live. The 7 super traits that make you successful also make you overfunction in love. And that's how they are quietly draining your desire, your pleasure, your power. In this free masterclass, you'll see why your effort, your empathy, your patience haven't brought you the intimacy and connection you crave. And in fact, they probably have you feeling lonely, not desired or pursued in the way that you want to be. You're going to discover the first step to building a relationship that actually feels mutual, alive, and sustainable. You're going to walk away knowing how super trait conditioning quietly drains your desire and connection, and what you can finally do to stop repeating the same patterns. This isn't about hormones or communication styles. It's about the way that our body has been trained to survive in love and how to rewrite the script so we can receive it instead of just perform love and pleasure. Head to the show notes, reserve your spot right now. We're going to discuss and give you language to name what's really been happening in your relationships. I've been teaching this to my private clients, and they are shocked that it's not them, it's their conditioning. You're going to get clarity on why therapy, communication, hormones, attachment styles haven't solved the problem. And I'm going to give you the first step that has been essential for all of my clients to stop repeating the same patterns in love and start creating a relationship that feels mutual and sustaining. So do not wait, reserve your spot, and I cannot wait to connect with you live.